First off, there's a lot of exciting things going on around here. Before I get to the recruiting class, construction is underway for our new facility. Whenever you see the fences coming up, construction zone, that's a good thing. So it's going to be fun watching the facility, come up. Of course, we're here to talk about recruiting. Even after football season, weren't, of course, satisfied with what happened. What you can do is go to work recruiting right away, which we did. Our guys did a great job. Our recruiting department, led by James Kirkland, our personnel, the head of personnel, Pat Embleton, our recruiting coordinator, Nate McNeil, Cam Skeldon, guys did a great job with it. Recruiting area-wise, we've, it's always about our state, Illinois, getting as many of our top players as we possibly can. Other areas that we've identified that we'll continue to recruit. Florida has been good to us in the past, and it was this year. And we wanted to make some ground in Texas this year. So, there's a lot said about, how many stars players have. We have our own system that we go through, and we evaluate, for need and just what we're looking for. We have a profile for all of our players. But, stars is a way to kind of separate some of the guys. This year we're able to get a couple players that, two that will be playing in the All-American game coming up a little bit later on. And just some good football players. Just kind of going over, it always starts up front with our lines. And we wanted to add some bulk, some good football players on both sides of the football. The defensive side, of course, we added a few. We have a lot of guys that we signed last year. But as we talk about, our state and doing well in it, we have to start talking about it first. And, recruiting battles sometimes go right up until the last minute, and that's definitely what happened with Vertus Brown. We've been recruiting over a year of trying to convince Vertus to come on board with us. Great family, great football player. Whatever side of the ball he chooses, we choose to play him. But really excited about getting Vertus Brown on board. Adding to the bulk a little bit, Calvin Avery, another good football player that we talk. As you look at our record a little bit last year with the amount of freshmen that we played, you can make a case that a lot of these guys will play right away too. But those two will probably highlight the class right away. Guys that most of you are probably pretty familiar with, but just a lot of other good football players too. In our state, a few guys, Jordan Slaughter, Julian Pearl, two football players. Slaughter would play on the line, but Julian Pearl brings some flexibility to our group, whether it's defensive end, tight end. If he keeps growing, you never know, maybe even offensive line, but we have some options there with him. Linebacker, tight end, both sides of the football as far as the backfield is concerned, offensive and defensive backfields, we're able to add some pretty good football players. Without me, talking much more, I can answer your question a little bit, talk about the class a little bit more in depth.
What did it mean for you guys? What was it like to hear Vertus say Illinois? And as long as you guys were in that, as big as he is in Chicago, what did that mean for you and your staff?
It meant an awful lot. You can imagine what it means to our program. And once you get a chance to know Vertus, and it's just a little bit more than the football player we were getting. We talk about taking care of our home state. We need to be able to get players like him. So we're all waiting like you were, for him to announce it, and found out a few minutes before. But again, exciting time. We're pumped up about it.
Well, basically, out of necessity, you had to play freshmen last year that you normally might consider redshirting. This year, do you have any added flexibility with maybe redshirting some of these incoming guys to get them stronger, so that way they're not thrown right into the fire like a lot of the guys were this year?
Well, thrown into the fire, that's not exactly how we described it. We just, we played our best football players. So happened our best football players were some guys that were young. No, I think each year you can say that a few freshmen will play. We assume the same thing will happen. Not as many, of course, as played last year, but just looking at some of the numbers and the stats and what we know about some of our players, some of them will play early too, but not as many, yes.
You mentioned the recruiting rankings. You guys are toward the bottom of the Big Ten in that. How do you address that? What's the answer to that?
I don't. I just know how we judge our players.
Yeah.
Last year's class, I don't know where it ended up in the ratings, but when we finished up the class, we felt really good about those players being able to play for us, contributing early. And this is another good class coming in. So I don't know exactly where we are, but I just know that there are players at just about every position that you can pinpoint that will eventually help us win a lot of games.
You really built up on the offensive and defensive line the last couple of years, just playing in the Big Ten. What do you think these guys add to your group that maybe you didn't inherit?
Well, we need that. I mean, it starts, every time we talk about that. It starts up front. Whether we want to run the football on the offensive side or pass blocking, you have to be able to have some guys up there. We played some young players this past year. They got some valuable experience, but we also felt like we need to add some more, and we were able to do that. In the defense side of football, you can say the same thing. So we'll continue to do it. Each year, if we have a class coming in, we should be adding linemen for those classes, and that's what we did this year.
The early signing period, do you think that helped you overall?
Yes, I do. I've always said I was in favor of it. If you're committed to a program and you know where you want to go, why not make it official? So that was good. I didn't know this many players would sign early. But, first time through, you never know for sure how it will play out. But, yes, I think most people involved would say the same thing. And for us, now, we're really excited about this class that we have on paper right now. But we still have some other spots available, which is neat, too. So we're starting over another cycle of recruiting for this January period before the second signing date. We still feel like we can get some more good football players in, too.
What's that number? Is it 5, 6, or how many?
Yeah, 5 to 6 in that area, yes.
Coach, what's it like having multiple avenues? You're at Cardinal Gibbons, Deerfield Beach, you're getting teammates down there, obviously with Calvin Avery and Keegan Myers down in Texas. What's it like having those high schools that you have a really good influence down there?
Well, that's the first place you go. Those areas you're talking about, of course, Florida and Texas. There's great football, great high school football there, and we do have relationships. We have a history with those guys. We trust what they say before we get our own evaluation. And once you start getting some players from an area, and they have success, of course, that leads to getting more players. So these areas want to continue, and these programs you talk about will have players each year. So that's definitely what we would like to do, and gotten off to a good start.
If you have a commitment from somebody who hasn't signed, is it possible they could sign in February?
Yes, it is. That is the case. You could have a commitment to someone, and they sign in February. So as I see it, we've closed the book on 2017 recruiting, I guess you could say. But 2018, getting ready to start back up. And everybody that isn't signed is a possibility for this next signing period for us.
What do you do next, Coach? What's the next? I know you hopefully go to Christmas, do something, but beyond that, what do you do in the next 5, 6 weeks?
Next 5 or 6 weeks, well, first art of business is to, exhale a little bit and get ready for Christmas. As a staff, we're going to take a little bit of time off around that time. And then it's, we have the convention coming up early part of January, and then it's another sprint, to the next phase of recruiting.
Can you work some ahead? Obviously you're working on the 5 or 6 spots. Can you work on the next class and the next class?
Bob, we're always working ahead.
Right.
Recruiting, it starts earlier and earlier, it seems like each year. Yes, we know for the most part who the players will be in this next a year from now that we're recruiting. We've been recruiting already. So yes, absolutely.
Lovie, of this group you have signed right now, how many do you hope will enroll in January?
And you can talk in detail with Pat and James, some of our recruiting guys, in a little bit later on, but about 3 at least, and we'll go from there.
St. Louis is an area you really have focused a lot of time. No signees from there yet. Just what do you think of your efforts down in St. Louis?
There are some good players, of course, down there, and we recruited that area hard. Sometimes it just doesn't work out up until this phase, at least. We missed out on a couple guys we were recruiting down there, but eventually we'll get some more.
Could you talk a little bit about Rivers, and when will he be getting here, and how do you plan to get him ready for the fall?
MJ Rivers, outstanding quarterback. We feel had a great career, led his team to the playoffs. Good size. He's been on campus a few times, but strong arm. He's an athlete, leader. Great leader in the locker room. All of the the characteristics, the profile that we set up for the quarterback position, we feel like he has. We've known about him for a long period of time. And he, nowadays guys are doing their research, knowing exactly, where they're going and their chances of playing and contributing and all those things. MJ got on board early on, and we're just excited to get him here. He won't be here, though, until this summer.
The Texas, recruits you got. I know you've spent some time there. Andrew Stoker spent some time there
Yes.
last year. What do you think kind of broke the dam this year to get a couple kids from it?
Of course, first off, there's great football down there. There's a lot of players, and it took us making a commitment first off that we were going to get into the area. You mentioned, Coach Stoker did a great job down there too. We have a lot of ties, a lot of connections, and it's an easy flight from Dallas to here, so it's a natural area for us to recruit. Getting some players like that, Kevin Myers should talk about him too, along with MJ and Calvin. Those guys are at good programs too, and hopefully next year it'll even increase the amount of guys we get from that area.
Lovie, on the mention in your own system of evaluating players, does that give you something different to look at than what you would see out of the ranking services? Maybe a way of seeing more of an upside in a player than you might get from saying, well, that's a 2-star player, for example.
Well, again, this is the only way we've as a general rule, you have to make your own evaluation. You can't trust somebody else's evaluation. How do you get stars? You have somebody sitting down looking at a player and putting stars on him. That's what we do for a living. We should know exactly what we're looking for. But as a general rule, I think if you have 2, 3 stars, you're saying that that's a player that's done some good thing. And for us, if you have traits and you're a pretty good football player, we feel like we have an excellent football staff that can develop, players. So I know the stars are kind of big deal. Everybody that we sign, we felt like can be a star. Look at it. Look at that star system that we have. We think can really elevate their game and become a pretty good football player.
What has Coach Stoker meant for your recruiting this year?
He, along with everybody else, we have an excellent overall staff. And a lot of these guys, it's just not one person. I mean, there was a lot of teamwork involved. Of course, you have a recruiting coach that initially started, but position coach, of course, is involved. The coordinators are involved, and I, of course, as a head coach. So there's a lot of people actually doing it. But, of course, Coach Stoker did a great job. But I could say that about all of our guys. They all did a super job.
When can you add your 10th guy?
When can we add? The early part of January, about the 8th or so, somewhere around there. I'm a guy that plans for the future most of the time. How's that?
And are any other changes on the staff coming or possible?
Every year there are some changes that happen, but not anticipating any.
What do you think is the biggest difference? You mentioned that you evaluate prospects a lot differently than some of the scouting services might. What do you think is one or two things that your staff values more highly than than maybe some of the scouting?
Well, first off, I don't know if we evaluate any different or not. We evaluate based on what we know and all of our years of experience on what a football player looks like at each position. I don't know how everybody else does it. So, and again, I don't. So that's the only way I can answer that question, really. Most of the time, there's a general consensus of the guys that can play for the most part, whether he's 4 stars, 3 stars, it's pretty close on most of the things you're talking about. But again, we have a profile. We use that same evaluation system to decide who starts, who's the backup. So it's all about the same thing.
Given, I think everyone's surprised how many people signed early, how does that change this next cycle as you look at your board now?
Well, for us, again, all these players, we know the players that are eliminated. We can just act like they're last year's class. And you just sprint to that next group. In an ideal, going into it, I wanted us to have at least about 5 available. And when I say available, it's just not, this next phase of recruiting until the February signing date, but there are transfers out there too. So we want to have a couple of options always as much as we possibly can.
Going back to Vertus, what has you excited about his game? How have you evaluated his skill set?
Well, skill set, excellent size, strength. He's a big man. He's an athlete too. I mean, he'll start off on the defensive side of the football for us. Whenever you have a guy, a 330-plus guy that can move and can run, can bend, and things like that, you're just excited about where he can eventually go, how much he can develop. Have a lot of options with a player like Vertus.
You're usually on time, so today I think that was him you were waiting on.
Way to call me out, Bob. Yes, we usually are. And if I'm not here, Bob, there's something going on where I can't be here. You should say that. I don't like to be late, but sometimes it's a must.
Well, you had a whole lot of defensive
Coach
backs.
Metters counts against your 25,
Yes, he will.
and can you tell me how that's, is he gonna be here this summer?
He will be, no, he'll be here in the next semester, the spring semester. Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes.
Who else besides him is gonna be here this next summer?
Pat, you want to help me out with that? Midterm.
Norwood, Rubin, and Shadon, and Vertus.
3, 4. Those 4. 4. At an early question, 4 guys that are coming midterm.
Coach Nicholas Walker, a junior college quarterback.
Yes.
Why did you feel you needed that, and what does he bring?
Well, even at the cornerback, you can't ever have enough good corners. And, the game is becoming more of a spread with 3 and 4 wide receiver sets where you have to be able to match up. So you need more corners. Maybe eliminate a linebacker that doesn't play that often. And you need more cornerbacks. So to be able to get a junior college player, a guy that's played a little bit of ball. And when we say St. Louis, maybe let's go back. I mean, he's from St. Louis, all right? So, but good matchup, excellent speed, quickness, vertical, all things you're looking for, we feel like he has.
Does he have 3 years?
Yes, he does.
Sidney Brown was kind of under the radar. What was his story, and how did you guys find him?
Well, just from the same, that area has been good to us as much as anything. And you watch video, our recruiting department. So we knew an awful lot about him. Coach Abraham, that's his area, knew quite a bit and stayed with him. But you start watching him on video, you like everything about him. Good hips, he'll hit, aggressive guy as a safety, good hands. So it was an easy one. We really think we're getting a good football player in him.
Are there certain needs that's top your board of what you want to fill in this?
Going forward?
Yeah.
Yes, there are. As you look at our roster a little bit, without showing our hand completely, it's easy for me to say we look for all positions. How's that, Jeremy? But defensively, we can add another defensive end. Our linebacker numbers need to get up a little bit. Can't ever have too many corners, I said. QB maybe, offensive line, tight end. Have I mentioned everything? I'll stop there. We're looking at all positions.
You've lost some kids since the end of the season.
Yes.
Any concerns about what's going on there? Is that number in your mind pretty normal?
Yes, I think it is pretty normal. When you're new to a program, guys will leave and move on. And our approach that we've taken, it's this, after 2 years, you know exactly how we do things. You know whether you're fit or not here. And if a player doesn't feel like he's a fit, you know, we wish him good luck as we move on. But there will be some players that will leave your program. And for us, we will replace them as soon as we can and keep going.
Just curious, when you get a kid who's, 320, played both ways in high school, I'm not even referring to anybody in specific, but how do you decide between, in your scheme, how do you decide if you want him on the O-line or D-line?
It's a good question. As a general rule, and not just because I'm a defensive guy, all right, sorry, but I think if you have an athlete like that, the first place you're going to look to play in would be on the defensive side of the football. You're looking for a little bit different type athlete. You like a big athlete that also has that type of ability that can run, move, bend his hips, and do all those kind of things. So as a general rule, you would probably start him on the defensive side. But then there are some special athletes that don't want any part of playing defense. All my life I wanted to be an offensive lineman. So happened I'm as good a good enough athlete to play on the defensive side. So we as a staff, just like everything else, will evaluate it and see what's kind of best for them. And when you initially get on campus, we're not putting it, your name in pen and ink or anything like that. We'll kind of see how it plays out.
Coach, how did you evaluate Kramer after this season?
Doug started a lot of football games for us, earned his way to playing time. Plays hard, tough. I can remember the Purdue game. He could barely, he had an ankle injury. Could barely walk, but he wanted to give it a try. Just a tough football player that gave us everything we asked every time he came out on the football field. Good first year for Doug.
You've got one grad transfer coming already.
I'm sorry?
You have one grad transfer coming.
Yes.
Do you anticipate maybe a couple more, or is that not sure?
Well, we would like to have options. I like to use that. We're not anticipating. No, right now we're not anticipating anyone, but we want to be able to add good football players to our roster and have an opportunity, a spot for that as often as possible.
Coach, right now you have a lot of defensive tackles. How important is depth at defensive tackle?
Depth is very important at the defensive tackle position. Depth is very important at the defensive end position. A couple of those guys, especially a guy like, I don't know exactly who all you're counting, but, Jamal Woods this past year played a little of both. But you can't have too many good defensive linemen. It's a physical football game, and you'll need most of them throughout the year. This past year, we had a couple good football players, too. As we talk about this class, Kendrick Green didn't play football for us this past year. We get him back this coming year. Larry Oladipo didn't play. Deion Pate. So we have three other guys that you didn't get a chance to see that are good football players that will be added to this mix.
Is Kendrick Green a guy you might think about moving to the offensive line?
We like to keep options open at all times, but Kendrick he's a defensive lineman for us, and we feel like he can play defense.